I was filling out paperwork when the galaxy came knocking. That is not a metaphor. I was sitting in my office aboard Cradle Station, Earth's orbital military hub, reviewing decommission forms for a batch of old frigates that nobody had flown in years. It was the kind of work that makes you wonder if you chose the wrong career. Outside my window, the blue curve of Earth turned slowly in the dark, and I remember thinking that it was a peaceful morning, the kind of morning where nothing ever happens. Then my console screamed. A Priority Zero transmission is the loudest sound in the military. You hear it once and you never forget it. I had heard it exactly twice in 30 years of service. Both times, people died. I dropped my coffee, cracked the mug against the desk, and opened the channel. The face that appeared on my screen belonged to Ambassador Thiel Vorsan, a Vathari diplomat I had met several times at Concord summits. The Vathari are a tall species with translucent skin, and they are famous across the galaxy for one thing above all else. They do not show emotion. They consider it undignified. In 40 years of galactic diplomacy, no human had ever seen a Vathari lose composure. Thiel was shaking. His hands trembled at his sides. His voice, normally as smooth as polished glass, cracked on the first syllable. He told me that the Darvesi Dominion, a civilization from the far edge of the galaxy that had refused all contact for centuries, had launched a massive invasion against the Lyrathi hegemony. The Lyrathi were one of the founding members of the Galactic Concord, an alliance of 34 spacefaring species that humanity had joined nearly 100 years ago. 4 Lyrathi colony systems had already fallen. The Concord had sent its combined fleet to stop them at a place called the Neural Corridor. The battle lasted 9 hours. The Concord lost 72% of its ships. I let that number sit in my chest for a moment. 72%. Thousands of ships, tens of thousands of lives, gone in less than a single day. Then Thiel said the words that changed everything. Admiral Marin, on behalf of the Galactic Concord, we are asking Earth for help. I want you to understand what that sentence meant. For 100 years, every species in the Concord had treated humanity like the loud, clumsy, slightly dangerous younger sibling at the dinner table. They respected us enough to let us sit down, but they never passed us the knife. We were too emotional, they said, too impulsive, too young. And now, in the worst moment their civilization had ever faced, they were calling us. I asked him one question. How long until the Dominion reaches Lyrathi Prime? 11 standard days, he said. I closed the channel, stood up, and walked to my command deck. My hands were steady. My heart was not. Within 2 hours, United Earth Security Council had convened and made its decision. There was no real debate. We had a treaty obligation, yes, but that is not why we said yes. We said yes because that is who we are. When someone is drowning, you do not check the paperwork first. You jump. The order came down to me in 4 words that I will carry for the rest of my life. Activate the Iron Veil fleet. Let me explain what that means, because the galaxy certainly did not know. For a century, Earth had shown the Concord a modest military presence. 50 light cruisers, a few carriers, enough to patrol our borders and escort our diplomats. The other species looked at our fleet and saw exactly what we wanted them to see. A minor power with minor ambitions. What they did not see were the sealed dockyards hidden in the asteroid belts of our solar system, buried in the moons of Jupiter, and tucked deep inside stations in the cold dark of the Oort cloud. We had been building in silence for 100 years. I watched the fleet come alive, and even I, who had known about it my entire career, felt something tighten in my throat. 6 Leviathan-class dreadnoughts, each 5 kilometers long, carrying shields that could shrug off planetary bombardment and kinetic accelerator cannons that could crack a moon. They had names pulled from our oldest legends: Kraken, Tiamat, Charybdis, Bakunawa, Jormungandr, Mokele. 12 Revenant-class carriers, each loaded with 400 combat drones and 200 manned interceptors. 48 Wolfpack stealth frigates, designed for ambush warfare, built to run cold and silent and patient. 24 Aegis heavy destroyers, engineered for one purpose only: to form a wall between danger and the people behind them, and to hold that wall no matter what. And my ship, the UES Prometheus, the only Olympus-class battlecruiser ever constructed. It carried Athena, the most advanced tactical intelligence ever built, a system that spoke with the calm of a librarian and thought at a speed I could not begin to comprehend. 142 warships, 73,000 crew, ready in 58 hours. The mobilization was something I will never forget. Retired engineers showed up at the dockyards in civilian clothes and asked where to report. Pilots who had been teaching at academies for years filed transfer requests within the hour. A transport arrived from Buenos Aires carrying 400 enlisted Marines, most of whom had written their wills that morning and sent them home before boarding. I watched a young technician tape a photograph of her daughter inside a maintenance panel and whisper something I could not hear. I did not need to hear it. I knew what it was. We departed Seoul through the Alcubierre corridor, a chain of faster-than-light transit points that would carry us to Lirathi space in 4 days. 4 days to prepare for the fight of our lives. I walked the corridors of Prometheus during the journey because I could not sleep. I found a Marine sitting against a bulkhead reading a paper copy of Don Quixote. I found a pilot taping her son's crayon drawing of a spaceship inside her cockpit canopy. I found a gunnery officer praying quietly in 5 different languages because, as he told me with a tired smile, he wanted to cover his bases. These were my people. These were the ones the galaxy had called reckless and undisciplined. The intelligence briefings on the Darvesi were not comforting. They were a hive-structured species, billions of drones controlled by a strategic caste called the Sarket. The Sarket did not feel anger. They did not know fear. They thought in pure mathematics and treated war the way a machine treats arithmetic, as a series of problems to be solved with maximum efficiency. Their warships were not built in factories. They were grown, organic metallic hybrids that could heal damage and adapt to enemy tactics in real time. Every civilization that had faced them alone had been absorbed. My grandmother was a Marine who fought in Earth's first interstellar skirmish. She told me once, "The math never favors us, Raya. That is why we stopped asking permission from the math." I held on to those words. Before we arrived, I made contact with the surviving Concorde fleet, about 60 battered warships regrouped near Lirathi Prime under the command of Fleet General Orin, a Corvathi officer. The Corvathi are enormous beings with stone-like skin, and Orin had commanded fleets for 60 years. He was skeptical of us. He told me plainly that if our fleet was what we had shown the Concorde for the past century, we would be dead within an hour. I told him, "What we have shown the Concorde is what we wanted you to see." He went quiet after that. We dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Lirathi system, and I gave the order for all ships to decloak at once. I later reviewed the bridge recordings from the Allied ships, and what I saw on those recordings is something I will carry with me forever. Tactical officers froze at their stations. Navigators stopped mid-sentence. Across 60 warships crewed by a dozen different species, every voice went silent at the same moment. 142 human warships appeared on their sensors. 6 of them were larger than anything the Concorde had ever built. Orin stared at his display for a long time. Then he turned to his second-in-command and said, very quietly, "They were hiding all of this. For 100 years. His second asked why. Orin answered, "Because they did not want us to be afraid of them." I assigned the Concorde fleet to escort civilian evacuation transports away from the planet. Orin objected. He said his ships could still fight. I told him, gently, "I know they can. But your people have bled enough. Let us take this one." Then the Darvesi arrived, and the sky went dark. Over 800 organic warships dropped into the system in mathematically perfect formations. Their fleet blotted out the stars. It was like watching a living equation close around you, cold and beautiful, and absolutely merciless. I gave the order, and my people answered. The Wolfpack frigate struck first. They had slipped ahead during our transit and positioned themselves behind the enemy formation. On my signal, 48 stealth ships hit the Darvesi rear in a coordinated torpedo barrage that targeted Sarket command nodes. 14 command vessels were destroyed before the Dominion could react. For the first time in recorded history, a Darvesi formation fractured. Then the Dominion redirected a third of their armada toward Lirathi Prime to strike the civilian population. My Aegis destroyers moved into orbit and formed a wall. I knew the captains of those ships. I knew their families. I knew that holding the line was a gentle way of saying they would absorb fire meant for cities. They held for 97 minutes under concentrated bombardment. 4 ships were lost. The rest did not move. Not 1 inch. Behind them, 20 million Lirathi civilians reached the evacuation transports and escaped. The dreadnoughts pushed into the heart of the enemy fleet, and the battle became something out of a nightmare. Kraken took severe damage along its port side and kept firing. Tiamat rammed a Darvesi carrier twice its size and detonated its forward magazine inside the enemy hull. The blast gutted the carrier from within. Tiamat's crew evacuated. 800 made it out of 1,200. Our carriers flooded the battlespace with thousands of drone fighters, swarming the adaptive enemy ships faster than they could evolve countermeasures. And our human pilots in their manned interceptors flew patterns that no computer would ever calculate. Wild, instinctive, creative maneuvers born from gut feeling and stubborn refusal to die. The Darvesi tactical systems were built to predict logical opponents. They could not predict us. They could not model the chaotic, brilliant, infuriating unpredictability of a species that fights with its heart as much as its mind. Athena identified the Darvesi flagship deep inside the formation, a massive vessel housing the primary Sarket strategic mind. I ordered Prometheus straight into the center. The fighting was the worst I have ever seen. I will not describe it with glory, because there was none. There was the sound of hull breaches and the hiss of emergency seals. There were names going dark on my tactical display, each one a ship, each ship a crew, each crew a collection of human beings who had families and futures and favorite songs. There was a young lieutenant calmly reporting that her engine room was on fire, and she was rerouting power through the backup grid. Her voice did not waver once. We reached firing range. I fired everything we had. The Darvesi flagship cracked open like an egg, and the strategic mind inside it died. Across the entire battle space, the Dominion drones lost coordination. Their perfect geometry collapsed into chaos, and then they ran. 800 ships became a scattering of survivors, fleeing toward the galactic fringe. The silence after a battle is never the kind people imagine. It is full of static and damage reports, and the sound of someone weeping over an open comm channel, because their best friend's ship is not answering hails. I sat in my command chair and listened to that silence and felt the weight of it settle into my bones. We lost 23 ships. 11 more were crippled beyond repair. 9,412 of my people would not go home. The dreadnought Tiamat was gone. 9 Wolfpack frigates were gone. 4 Aegis destroyers were gone. Every surviving vessel carried scars that would never fully heal. Days later, the Galactic Concord held an emergency assembly. 34 species, all gathered in a vast chamber, and every single one of them was looking at me. They asked me to speak. I did not give a grand speech. I said, "You asked for help. We came. That is what neighbors do." Fleet General Oren found me afterward. He stood before me in silence for a long time. Then he said, "For 100 years, we thought we understood your species. We were wrong. You are not reckless. You are not undisciplined. You simply refuse to believe that any fight is unwinnable, and you carry your dead with you, so they are never forgotten. I have commanded fleets for 60 years, and I have never seen anything like what your people did." I told him, "We are not special, Oren. We are just stubborn." He thought about that, then he said, "Perhaps the galaxy needs more stubbornness." We limped home toward Sol at reduced speed. The fleet was battered and broken and beautiful. I walked the corridors one last time. The pilot still had her son's drawing taped in her cockpit, now pasted over a crack in the glass. The Marine had finished Don Quixote during the journey home and told me it made him cry. The gunnery officer, after everything, prayed in only one language, his mother's, and simply said thank you. I stood at the viewport and watched the stars pass by, slow and endless and impossibly bright. They would write about this battle in their histories. They would call it a turning point. They would study our ships and analyze our tactics, and try to understand how we did what we did. And they would miss the point entirely. It was never about the fleet. It was about the people willing to fly it into the dark.